Hello, BookTube. I went to the Brattle today, and I was about to launch off right away into telling you all about the books I got, and then I remembered what I'm trying to remember in every video, which is that there are dozens and dozens more people here than there were a month ago, who might not know what I'm talking about. So for those of you who are new to the channel, new to the concept, here in Boston, there's a used bookstore called the Brattle Bookshop, and they're terrific. They're a terrific used bookstore where you walk in the door. It's an old building. There's marble staircase. There's the first two floors are just general topic used books, all reasonably priced, jam-packed. And then the third floor is slightly more collectible items, first editions, rare printings, that sort of thing. And that alone would make the Brattle Bookshop an incredible destination for a book lover, because they have a huge turnover. Right as you walk in the door, there's a buying table that's enormous, and there's different books there every minute of every day. They have a huge buying turnover, unlike a lot of used bookstores that I have loved and visited in the past, where I might have loved talking to the staff, I might have loved the bubbles in the fish tank, but if I saw a history of the Habsburg Empire one day, I could go back a month later and know that it would be there. It was just a question of budgeting the books, but they weren't going anywhere. That's not true with the Brattle. The Brattle has such an enormous buying rotation that the books change every day. And that would be enough to make them a great destination anyway, but in addition to that, they have a lot. The lot next door, where ordinarily there would be another building, is empty, and the Brattle has filled it with sale books. $1, $3, and $5 sale books. And not junk. Not moldy, silverfish-ridden, rained-on garbage like you get in the outside lots of many other used bookstores. Instead, great stuff. Absolutely great stuff. I have often said, it's absolutely true, I saw it today, that you can, if you go to the Brattle with $20, you can walk out with 20 great books from the sale lot, and that's not bad. So anyway, I went to the Brattle today, and ordinarily that wouldn't be big news, but I don't get there as often as I used to. I just don't. And it's not even... once upon a time, I didn't get there as often as I wanted because I worked, and I didn't work nearby. These days, I don't even know the reason. There isn't really an objective reason, because I work from home, and my little Frida Bean can be left. She's a perfectly healthy, happy, well-adjusted, normal dog. She knows perfectly well that if I leave, I'm coming back, and that I'm not going to be long. And there isn't a reason. There isn't a good reason, except for a sort of general feeling on my part that I want to pare down my books. And I want to have fewer books. But that's a kind of perennial thing with book lovers, isn't it? You always want fewer books. It doesn't actually stop you from buying new ones. So anyway, so today, it was a rare occasion where I can report that I went to the Brattle Bookshop. It was an overcast, humid day, but not raining, so all the carts were out and uncovered, and I had a blast. I had a blast. I just indulged myself, and it felt great. And I got a bunch of stuff, and I wanted to show it to you. And some of the things here reinforce... There is a karma about the Brattle sale lot. I know that sounds dippy, but there are all sorts of things about the Brattle sale lot. One of the main things about the Brattle sale lot, or the sale table, is that you can't force it. You can't force the karma of the place. So you can't, if you go to the Brattle outside lot, which is not organized in any way other than price, if you go there saying, well, what I want the lot to deliver to me is a hardcover, nice slipcase edition of the Blithedale Romance by Nathaniel Hawthorne, you won't find it. And while you're looking for it, I guarantee you will be overlooking things you really want that are arriving in front of you by random chance. So that's one thing. You can't force the karma of the Brattle. Another thing that I've noticed is that sets, pairs, and series, if you see one of them in the sale lot, you're almost certainly going to see them all. So, because the person who sold the one will have had the others. That is an extreme likelihood. So, if you see a book in a series, and it's not the first book in the series, and you think, oh, well, I would get it, but it's not. I want the whole series, but I want it for the first one. Get it. Because you're going to see the first book when you go back, and by then the second book or whatever in the series might be gone. And the third thing that these books today demonstrate is the serendipity of the Brattle. I often want my standard go-to phrase for the Brattle Bookshop is the Brattle will provide. not only will I find everything I need there eventually, but also there's a kind of call and response. The gods give a call and response at the Brattle where something will come up in my life. A book will come up in my life, and I will realize that I don't have it, and that I want it, and the next time or the time after that I go to the Brattle, there it will be. I just want to see that repeated over and over again here. But the first book isn't any of those. The first book is an oldie but a goodie, with these old Pelican mass-market paperbacks that are so solidly put together that even though I don't particularly like mass-market paperbacks anymore, I had to grab this. I've had it many times, and I've handed it out many times. It's this. It's good reading. Which started out as, there was a college series. When was it? In 1925? No, 1920. In 1920 at Columbia University, Professor Erskine did a great books series, a great books class that was enormously popular. Enormously popular. You had young people, old people, his colleagues on the staff. You had standing room only in the aisles. You had people listening at the door, outside the classroom, outside. And that's kind of ironic, because you couldn't do that today. If a white English professor made a series about the canon called Great Books, he would be sued, he would be doxxed, his family would be driven from their home, his home would be burned down, the university would probably be burned down, there would be endless lawsuits from students who had not been given any trigger warnings, who had been forced to support the patriarchy, or any of this nonsense shibboleths that are all over college campuses today. You couldn't do such a course, and if you did, you'd be derided. You wouldn't be popular. And that course gave rise to this book. It started out, people got wind of that course and how invigorating it was, how this author was, this professor was saying what I've often said on this channel, which is that the books in the canon are there for a reason, and that reason has nothing to do with patriarchy or power or anything like, or white privilege or any of these nonsense phrases of the 21st century. These books are here because they've earned their place, and if you read them, you will see that. There's no deadweight anywhere. And this professor was enthusiastically towing that line 100 years ago, and his lecture gave rise to a pamphlet, because people were saying, okay, well, I wasn't at the lecture, but I want that list. I want the list and his general remarks. So there was a pamphlet that sold like crazy. It was printed everywhere, and that became a book called Good Reading. And the book steadily expanded, and then steadily expanded, and this is still very small, but this is one of 80 billion copies that were printed and sold about this. And I didn't get it. I mean, it was $1 at the Brattle. I didn't get it because I need the guidance. Unlike most of the people that loved this book when it was originally printed, I don't need the guidance. I got it because I want the remarks. I want the descriptions of these books that I know so well, that I love so much. That's why I got this. But and it's going to provide an hour or two of wonderful reading. And also, I realized when I saw it, it belongs on the bookcase of mine that is just books about books. It definitely belongs there. It set the taste of a whole generation. Then this next one, perfect example of what I talked about. You see a book in the series, and it's not the first book, but it is a series that you want, in editions that you want. Get it, because the first book will show up. Someone who sold Claudius the God in this old white paperback to the Brattle will certainly have sold them I, Claudius. And I realized this is the version of Claudius that I want. Of I, Claudius and Claudius the God. I want it in these old BBC cover white mass markets. And I don't want them in any other form, unless some new form comes along. But the paperbacks, the trade paperbacks of I, Claudius and Claudius the God, have women's breasts on them. I ask you, women's breasts scarcely make an appearance in these books. And as far as cover design goes, I just think it has to be the most cynical ploy for readers that I've ever heard of. One way or another, I, Claudius and Claudius the God, I hope someday in my life to see a big fat Penguin classic of both books in one volume, something like that. But in the meantime, I will gladly take these and reread them. I want to reread both these books, and I've wanted to for a couple of years now and haven't found these. Amazingly, there are times when I had 4 copies each of both these volumes in this format. Now, this is my only one of this, and I don't have the white mass-market paperback of I, Claudius. Can you believe it? One of the most iconic book productions of the 20th century, and I don't have it. If you see it, sing out, because I want it, and I'll trade you something for it. But in the meantime, this is the story of Claudius after he becomes emperor. I, Claudius, is the story of his life as all of his relatives and in-laws and friends and acquaintances have to deal with the rise of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, the Augustus Caesar and Caligula, and of course in this book, Nero, the teenage Nero, is lurking in the sidelines, and Livia, the terrific historical creation that Robert Graves decides is guilty of everything. There are lots of heroes too. I, Claudius is a strange reading experience. It doesn't try to win you over in any of the conventional ways that a novel does. And this is, if anything, much more along those lines, because this thing has hundreds of pages of digressions about it. A character called Herod Agrippa, who's not Claudius, and has, in the hundreds of pages of digressions, nothing to do with Claudius. Nevertheless, this is a terrific book about an idealistic Republican who is emperor, and who finds that there is no way for that to happen cleanly. As he wonderfully puts it in this book, I having started with the best of intentions, I find that I have murdered 17 men. So I was happy to find this, and I know that I will see the first one. And then these next three, oh my God, I just mentioned them on this channel. I just mentioned that I need them, that I don't have them, and that the Brattle will provide them. And then the Brattle did. Look at this. Conan the Warrior, Conan, and Conan the Usurper. These are three of the Conan volumes that were Frankenstein into existence by L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter in the late 1960s and 70s. All with these terrific Frank Frazetta covers. Look at that. Look at those. Isn't that? Look at that. Just iconic Frank Frazetta covers. And there were a bunch of others. I think the whole series was there. Somebody must have dumped the whole series at the Brattle. I only got these three. These are classic short stories that have been very little monkeyed with by L. Sprague de Camp, who in the longer standalone novels in this series, these great pulpy old paperbacks that I loved so much when they originally were appearing, a lot of the novels in this series are almost all L. Sprague de Camp. But even these short stories, God, you should read his original introductions to these volumes. To us now, it seems like complete heresy, where he's saying, yeah, I came across the draft of a story in Howard's papers and liberally rewrote it for publication. And in the introductions to these anthologies, L. Sprague de Camp is saying, well, I liberally rewrote this for original publication, but for this book, I've decided to rewrite it a lot less. You're reading that thinking, no, this is Robert E. Howard. You don't rewrite him at all. I don't want your hand in the mix. L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter's hands are in the mix in these books, but I want them anyway. Just for the pure sentimentality of it. I will probably go back to the Brattle and get the others if they're still there, because I once upon a time had the whole set in a boxed, a little box set, and I don't know what happened to that. I wish I still had it. But anyway, these are, you can't really, I'm writing a huge piece on Conan the Barbarian in the new year, and you can't really write about Conan without writing about these volumes. They introduced Conan to an enormous reading audience, so and they were right there. The Brattle provided them. So these next two are big fat paperback history volumes. One of them has slid down here. There we go. That I saw they were dirt cheap. I think they were $3 a piece. So I grabbed them because I don't have the hardcovers and I want to reread them. The first one is this: Christendom Destroyed by Mark Greengrass. This is all about the event at the heart of it is the Protestant Reformation, Martin Luther. But that's the heart, that's the pebble, and then this book is all of the overlapping, the outmoving circles of that. Christendom, of course, I'm not completely sure that Christendom is destroyed in this book, but I remember when I read this originally, I thought, my God, the ambition of the scope of this thing is astonishing. And that was in a boringly designed, I think it was a Viking hardcover, whereas this is Penguin. This is a Penguin paperback, which is the kind of the format that I would want it in. So I grabbed it. And I also grabbed this. This is a vintage book. This is Fred Anderson, The Crucible of War, about the 7 Years' War. Terrific work of history. And when I saw it at the Brattle for like $3, I wasn't sure if I had it or not. Isn't that terrible? I sometimes in my mind, when I'm looking at books in used bookstores, I get this book mixed up with 3 Victories and a Defeat, even though they're about wildly different things. They're both terrific. This is fantastic. Just a big, involving work of history about a crucial conflict, a conflict that doesn't get the attention that it deserves. So when I saw it for dirt cheap, I grabbed it. So I've got these 2 nice, big, fat history volumes to just put on the history shelf. And then we have 4 hardcovers, and then we'll be done. And the first of these is another example of the Brattle providing. I've mentioned on this channel that when I go to used bookstores now, I am looking for great volumes, great short story collections, to make a whole shelf of great short story collection volumes. And when I originally had that idea, I thought American short stories. But then I realized, no, it doesn't have to be. As long as it's a fantastic short story collection from the 20th century or thereabouts, I'll take it. And I'm glad that I didn't leave those blinkers on, because I saw one today that the author's technically English, but it's such a book. Ooh, it's the John Collier reader. Big, thick thing that I obviously need to repair it and reinforce it. That won't be trouble at all. This will go on the shelf because this author is terrific. He's not known to most of the reading public, but he is terrific. This volume includes a ton, I think maybe all of his short stories, and also his novel, a novel called His Monkey Wife, that is one of the most disturbing things. His thing was to be genteel on the surface and unbelievably disturbing just under the surface. So stories like A Touch of Nutmeg Does It, or the novel His Monkey Wife, they're just so subversive. They're so creepy and wonderful. They're I suppose you might call it gothic, although I always think of it as something a little more ambitious than that. But I was so happy to see this. This definitely belongs on that shelf. I never know what short story collection volume I'm going to find next, but I have a few in mind. I won't go to the Brattle or any other place specifically looking for them, but I have a few in mind. I would like a Flannery O'Connor, for instance, a big collection of Flannery O'Connor. There's, I think, a beautiful paperback, newish paperback that I would love to have for that. Also, Evelyn Waugh, a bunch of others, a bunch of other people. Also, the Best American Short Stories, that series that comes out every year, they did a volume, an enormous volume, called Best American Short Stories of the Century for the 20th century. A huge red dust-jacketed hardcover that was edited in heavy air quotes by John Updike, and that has, of course, many John Updike stories in it. Utterly shameless. But that's another volume that I want. Is I'm going to have a short story collection. But I was so happy to find this, and I don't know if you will ever find it, but I strongly recommend John Collier if you like being totally creeped out. And this next one, something that came up on this channel. I was doing a tour of the history bookshelves. I think that's when it came up. And somebody asked me what I thought of Doris Kearns Goodwin's book, A Team of Rivals, her great history of the Abraham Lincoln's administration. And I praised it, of course. It's terrific. It's amazingly engrossing. And once I was done, I thought, boy, it might be nice to revisit that book. And of course, I didn't have it. I didn't have a copy. The Brattle provided. Here's a copy of A Team of Rivals. There's a movie edition from the Lincoln movie that's actually fairly attractive. Most movie editions are so hideous, but the movie edition version of this is just called Lincoln, and it's got Daniel Day-Lewis's craggy, silhouette on the cover, his profile. And I had that for a long time. I think I sent that to one of you. But if I'm going to I'm a big, thick, deckled-edged hardcover is fine with me, because this is a book to reread. Then this next one was a find. I wasn't expecting it, didn't expect to see it at all. I loved it. I had an old mass market paperback that actually had the red page spines. This old pulpy paperback that I read until it fell apart. I read it until it died. So finding a beautiful hardcover that looks as new as the day it was printed was a find. It's Freedom at Midnight by Collins and LaPierre, the author of Oh, Jerusalem and Is Paris Burning? A bunch of other nonfiction classics that are so novelistic. They are so gripping. And this is about the Indian Partition. This is about Indian freedom from British rule, and all the huge, larger-than-life characters who are involved. So you can see a lot of them on the cover there. And I loved this book when I read it. I read it and reread it for its characterizations of the king and of Mountbatten and of Gandhi. And when I saw this, I was thinking, it was already on my mind because I got that enormous Gandhi book just yesterday. And I was thinking, okay, a lot of this is going to have to do with partition. And God, I wish I had Freedom at Midnight. And here it is. So now I do. And it's nice also that it's not just helping that Gandhi book. It's also a history work that I want, that I would want to have on my shelves. And then this last one, we just mentioned it. I just mentioned it the other day. I mentioned not having it the other day. I didn't even know what it was. I was doing a tour of the history bookshelf, and I showed you Thomas Costain, and I praised the daylights out of him. He is such a readable author. And I remember looking through the 3 volumes that I have and thinking that, there's one other that I'm thinking of here, and I can't remember what it is. Here it is. It's The Last Plantagenets by Thomas Costain. This includes a long digression of his on The Princess in the Tower, his take on it that is just thrilling. This is a terrific book. Just a fantastically readable book. It's in a little rough shape, but I'll fix that. And there it was at the Brattle. The Brattle provided. So that's it. That was my Brattle trip today. I count it as a huge success because I think a lot of these books I will actually hold on to. One of the things that sort of disenchanted me with going to the Brattle every day, I was going every day just recently because I had 2 old sick dogs here at the house. And those of you who've ever cared for anyone you love, human or dog or cat, you know what I'm talking about, that when you suddenly realize, okay, the fun part of this relationship is over. Now it's my job to be a caretaker. I must help you up and down off the furniture. I must clean up after you with a good nature and no reprimands if you pee or poop. I must encourage you and reassure you when you feel frightened by the things that are happening in your own body, as you will. When that becomes your role, you can't shirk it. That's number one. Well, plenty of people do. Oh, I volunteer time at an animal shelter, and I've lost count of how many people come through the door with an old dog and say, he's too much trouble. Unprintable thoughts when that happens. But no, for the rest of us, normal people, ethical people, when that comes upon you, you can't shirk it. But you also have to be careful to care for yourself when that happens. It is not selfish to do that. If you don't husband your own strength, you won't have it. It's a marathon when you enter that. It's not a sprint. If you don't husband your own strength, you won't have it when it counts. So as weird as it seems, you have to take care of yourself. And when my girls were sickening and then dying, I left them almost every day. For a little while, a couple of hours is usually what I held myself to. And I did that by going to the Brattle, because the walking around the books at the Brattle and talking to them in my mind, having them talk to me, and having them play in my memories all the roles that these books have played over time, took me out of myself. It took me out of the world that I was in as a caregiver for just long enough to recharge my batteries. I would go back and I was all theirs for all the afternoon, all of the night, the hard nights. That digression was all because one of my problems, the problems that I developed with the Brattle, is that I would just get an armload of stuff. When the books are so cheap, you're tempted to do that. I would just get an armload of items, some that I'd never heard of before, just to explore. And that disenchanted me to the Brattle when it shouldn't have. It should have disenchanted me from my own buying excess. It's my fault, not the Brattles, that they have great selection. So what I'm trying to do now with the Brattle and other used bookstores is buy judiciously. Buy so that get what I know I want. Things I know I want to keep. Some places it's harder to control yourself than others when you've got in front of you a sea of crammed book carts and every book on them is $1. That's hard. Or for instance, in the first weekend of October, the Boston Public Library book sale is the first weekend in October. That library sales are tough. We shall see. But anyway, I think I did well today because I can't imagine readily getting rid of most of these things. So we'll do a little Steve pile. This is The Last Plantagenet. It's Thomas Costain, just when I asked for him. Then Team of Rivals, Doris Kearns Goodwin, her great book on Lincoln and all of his envious lieutenants. Then Freedom at Midnight, Collins and Lapierre, about the Indian independence from Britain and also the partition. Then the John Collier Reader to go on my epic short story collection shelf. Then Crucible of War and Christendom Destroyed, 2 fat paperback history volumes. Then 3 Conan volumes by L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter, and a little bit by Robert E. Howard. And then Claudius the God by Robert Graves, and I'm just expecting to see I, Claudius either at the Brattle or somewhere else soon. And Good Reading, a classic companion to a great lecture series on the Western canon. To which I should add, since we started with that, I'll end with that. I should add, I am perfectly happy to add books to the Western canon, but there's only one way that happens. That's through time and testing. It's not because you think you're redressing a wrong. It's not because you think too many of one's skin color or gender is represented in the canon. They're not there because of that, and so they shouldn't be removed because of that. Instead, broaden sensibilities, absolutely, so that great works from the past that have been excluded because of those reasons can now be included. But you don't remove anything because of those reasons. It's a slippery slope that will lead you to remaking the canon in your own image. And no reader is that great. No, you're not all that. If I'm not all that, you're not all that. But anyway, it's going to be fun to revisit that book, especially since I will see in its contents, I'm sure, books that were once part of the canon and have gradually moved away, been weeded out of the canon. That happens. It's a natural, organic process. I couldn't be happier that natural, organic process is starting now to include a much greater variety of voices from the 17th century, the 18th century, and the 19th century. And we're much more aware in the 21st century that great work can happen anywhere, in many voices. That's wonderful. I couldn't be happier about that. But it's going to be fun to see some old favorites in this book that I love that aren't taught in schools anymore. But anyway, that was my trip to the Brattle, and the reason that the video is so long is because I hardly ever get to the Brattle anymore. Maybe that will change in the new year. Who knows? It would be so different if Frida Bean was content to come with me to the Brattle. If that were true, I would go every day. But she doesn't like being on the subway, first of all. And when she's at the Brattle, she screams at everybody to stop and pet her. And, for every 2 dog owners or dog people who think that's utterly adorable, she's so adorable when she wants your attention. She just swarms up your leg and is waving her hands in the air for you. But for every 2 people like that, I'd be happy to have that happen in the sale lot of the Brattle. There'll be a person who's not a dog person. And as hard as it is for me to understand, I can step back objectively and say, for that person, I am hurting their experience at the Brattle, and I don't want to do that any more than I want my own experience for her. So I don't know, if I could guarantee that there are some people who bring dogs to the Brattle sale lot, and I love it because they're extremely well behaved and they keep to themselves. Frida doesn't keep to herself. As far as she's concerned, you're all here to play with her. So maybe that will change with time. Maybe I'll try it. I'll give it a test run. It's been a long time since we tried going to the Brattle. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for now. But I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.